Hi everyone, so I decided to do my presentation on Erikson. So Erikson was born in 1902 in Frankfurt, Germany, where he was raised by a single mother from a Jewish background. He did not know his real father and was later raised by his stepfather and eventually used his surname Erik Homburger while growing up. This caused the struggle with his identity since it left confusion about who he really was. Later in life, Erikson was sent to take a teaching position in Vienna, where he was able to meet Anna and Sigmund Freud. This led to Erikson training with Anna and pursuing in the field of psychoanalysis, where he studied child development. So this helped increase his awareness of social influence on personality. During Erikson's time working with Anna Freud, he met his soon-to-be wife, Joan Serson. They married in 1930 and had 4 children. She also had an impact with Erikson's writing as she was a part of some editorial work throughout his career. They eventually had to emigrate to the United States during the rise of World War II, and despite having no formal degree, Erikson was offered a teaching position at Harvard Medical School. In addition to his position at Harvard, he also had a private practice in child psychoanalysis and later held teaching positions at other high-end universities such as Berkeley, Yale, and the San Francisco Psychoanalytic Institute. The most recognizable contribution from Erikson is his stages of psychosocial development in psychology, as he is one of the few stage theorists to develop a lifespan from birth to old age. Another contribution that others might not be aware of is his research on cultural and ethnic influence on individuals. His study of Native Americans influenced his ideas on culture and social life. Studies like this and his evolution of identity can be found within his popular books, Childhood in Society, as well as Identity, Youth, and Crisis. Erikson seemed to have a good perspective of women, as he even referred to his wife as an intellectual partner, since she had an impact and influence on some of his work. This is considered a big deal during his time, since referring to women as intellectual was uncommon. However, feminists argue that Erikson's 8-stage lifespan development is generally more male-oriented. For instance, men were more concerned about their occupation, while women tended to be tied by their role as a mother and wife. Erikson considered religion to be an important influence in personality development. Erikson's lifespan development coexists with his interest in religion and human values, since he assigned virtues to each psychosocial stage of development. Erikson's understanding of the way in which individuals manage to acquire these virtues factored into his understanding of how social values are transformed. Religion then becomes a critical term of analysis and development at each stage. For instance, the first stage of trust versus mistrust develops the virtue of hope. Erikson came up with 8 stages in our lifespan that can make up our personality and who we are. Throughout these stages, some might find themselves stuck in a certain stage, which can lead to a struggle with their own identity, so there is a sense of good versus bad. Throughout these stages, our personality can eventually change over time as we grow older. The first stage is trust versus mistrust, beginning at infancy, where we begin to form trust from our caregivers. Then we have autonomy versus shame and doubt in early childhood, where we begin to be supported or shamed for our sense of independence. Next is initiative versus guilt, which is the play stage. Then there is industry versus inferiority stage during school time, where their competence is being tested. Next is identity versus role confusion, which happens during adolescence and forming one's identity. Then we have intimacy versus isolation, where social factors play a role in forming intimate relationships. After this is generativity versus stagnation during adulthood as a sense of guiding the next generation. And lastly, the stage of integrity versus despair, which occurs during old age, which begins to reflect back on the life we have lived. According to Erikson, infancy is a major part of our development. This occurs during his stage of trust versus mistrust. The primary relationship of this stage is the mother, and during this time, the infant needs to be fed, comforted, and protected. The infant will develop a sense of trust only if the caregiver is responsive and consistent with the basic needs being met. Otherwise, a sense of mistrust will develop. If infants are neglected and not given these things consistently, or if they are taken care of roughly and unpredictably, they will learn to question their caretakers and to believe that others will not always be there to support them when it's needed. Learning to trust others is the first necessary step to learning how to have loving, supportive relationships with others and have a positive self-image. Erikson's ideas have become one of the most well-known and most significant theorists in psychology. Unlike many other development theorists of his era, Erikson's psychosocial theory of human development covers the entire lifespan, including adulthood. It also allows us to emphasize the social nature of human beings and the important influence that social relationships have on development. His theory and stages of human development have become novel as it is still prevalent in today's society. He even coined the term identity crisis, which is also still heavily used and looked upon today. This concept, found in the identity versus role confusion stage, gives insight to an internal conflict found within one's development. Erikson's research on minorities have also paved the way in research to including the importance of ethnic and cultural identity. Erikson would view myself in the early stage of intimacy versus isolation since I am currently 21 years old, and so I would fit in this category. Since I am currently single, he would see this as a possible conflict in my life since this stage is primarily about finding and developing a close and intimate relationship with another person. As I begin entering adulthood in this stage, I should begin forming these relationships in order to avoid isolation and loneliness later in life. Now I will begin comparing and contrasting the theories and views from Erikson versus Freud. Just like Erikson, Freud is also known for being a stage theorist. They both believe that personality develops in a series of determined stages and that much of people's development occurred early in life. Similarly, they both believe that a conflict had to be resolved in order to progress onto the next stage. The difference between Freud and Erikson is that Freud emphasized the importance of basic needs and biological forces, whereas Erikson focused more on social and environmental factors. Erikson's developmental theory was much more comprehensive compared to Freud, as his theory describes the impact of social experiences on identity throughout a whole lifespan, unlike Freud, who described development solely based on sexuality, as well as his theory ending at an earlier period. Another difference found between the two theorists is that Erikson believed that the ego in which Freud described was far more than just a mediator between the superego and the id. He saw the ego as a positive driving force in human development and personality. Therefore, he believed that the ego's main job was to establish and maintain a sense of identity, whereas Freud believed that the id is the most primitive and instinctual part of the mind that contains sexual and aggressive drives. In conclusion, I decided to choose Erik Erikson for this project because of his influence and inspiration on research in the field of psychology. His theories became the foundation for other researchers to build on to his original ideas. I also find his theory on psychosocial development to be the most accurate when it comes to identity and personality. I find myself looking through his stages and comparing my life and how similarly it relates to his ideas of conflict and identity. Erikson is an overall significant figure in the world of psychology in which his work will continue to spread knowledge further on into the future.